March 17th, 1899, 11:47 p.m. The Blackwater River, Waterford, Ireland. 3 fishermen hauling nets near Reginald's Tower hear at first the thunderous approach of hooves on cobblestone moving at impossible speed through the medieval streets. Then the screaming, high-pitched, terrified, distinctly human, yet somehow not quite right. The matched pair of Cleveland bays, worth more than most Waterford families earned in 5 years, crashes through the wooden barrier at Merchant's Quay. The ornate carriage behind them, its brass fittings gleaming in the moonlight, becomes airborne for just a moment. Then the river swallows everything, the horses, the carriage, and Lady Catherine Thornbury-Blake, the most powerful woman in County Waterford. The fishermen row frantically to the spot, but when they arrive, the water lies perfectly still. No thrashing horses, no struggling woman, no debris floating to the surface, just an unnatural calm that makes their skin crawl. In the morning, authorities will drag the river. They'll find nothing. Not a horseshoe, not a wheel spoke, not a single thread of Lady Catherine's famous crimson evening cloak. But the truth was far more terrifying than a simple carriage accident. Before we uncover the truth about the Waterford carriage horses and the aristocrat whose body never surfaced, make sure to subscribe to the Silent Abbey and ring that notification bell. We're building a community of history seekers who aren't afraid to explore the darkest corners of the past. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers around the world. Now, let's step back into 1899 Waterford, where something ancient was awakening. Waterford in 1899 stands at a crossroads between two worlds. The Victorian era bleeds into its final years. Queen Victoria herself has just months left on the throne, though no one knows it yet. Ireland chafes under British rule, the wounds of the Great Famine still raw after 5 decades. The land war has ended, but resentment simmers in every tenant cottage, every disputed boundary line, every foreclosed farm. Waterford City, Ireland's oldest, wraps itself around the tidal Blackwater River like a serpent. Medieval walls still stand, built by Vikings 1,000 years before. Reginald's Tower, the massive circular fortress at the quay, has witnessed centuries of conquest, rebellion, and bloodshed. The cobblestones themselves seem to remember. The Thornbury-Blake family owns everything that matters. 17,000 acres, stretching from the river to the Comber Mountains, 38 tenant farms, the textile mill that employs 200 families, the shipping concern that controls river trade, even the newspaper that shapes public opinion. At the apex of this empire sits Lady Catherine Thornbury-Blake, 43 years old, widowed young when her husband took a mysterious fall from the north tower of their estate. Childless, despite 2 decades of marriage, beautiful in that severe, untouchable way that makes men nervous and women resentful, she wears her wealth like armor. Parisian gowns, South African diamonds, and that distinctive crimson cloak made from silk so fine it cost more than a laborer's annual wage. But wealth doesn't buy affection in 1899 Waterford. The tenants whisper about evictions. 12 families turned out in the past year alone. Old Margaret Byrne, 84 years old, dragged from the cottage where she was born because the rent was 3 weeks late. The Malloy children watching as constables threw their possessions into the mud. The way Lady Catherine sat in her carriage during evictions, face blank as marble, sipping tea from bone china while families wept. The mill workers talk about conditions. 14-hour days. Children as young as 7 operating machinery that mangles fingers and crushes hands. The foreman who punishes bathroom breaks by docking a full day's pay. The locked exits, a fire safety violati. On everyone knows about, but no one can stop because Lady Catherine owns the magistrate who would enforce the law. And there are older stories, darker ones, stories about the Thornbury-Blake estate, built on the ruins of an ancient monastery dissolved by Henry VIII. Stories about monks who cursed the land before they died. Stories about things seen in the fog that rolls off the river on certain nights. Stories about horses that refuse to pass certain spots on the estate roads. Stories about servants who quit without explanation, their eyes holding secrets they won't share. There's something not right about that place, says Father Donnelly at St. Patrick's Church, though he never elaborates. Something that predates the family, something that feeds on cruelty. Most dismiss this as superstitious nonsense. This is 1899 after all, the age of electricity and telegraphs and rational thought. The new century approaches, bringing modernity and progress. But in Waterford, the past doesn't stay buried. The medieval walls remember, the Viking tower watches, and the river, always the river, keeps its secrets. Lady Catherine seems untouchable. She moves through Waterford society like a queen through her subjects. The mayor bows, the clergy defer. The newspaper prints only flattering coverage. Her matched Cleveland bays, Thunder and Tempest she calls them, are the finest horses in 5 counties. Her carriage, imported from London, gleams with brass fittings and bears the family crest on its doors. On March 17th, 1899, St. Patrick's Day, she attends a gala at the Assembly Rooms. She wears diamonds and that crimson cloak. She drinks champagne and laughs at jokes she doesn't find funny. She mentions casually that another family, the O'Sullivans, 7 children under 10, will be evicted the following week. No one objects. No one dares. At 11:30 p.m. she calls for her carriage. Her driver, Thomas Walsh, brings Thunder and Tempest around. The horses seem agitated, Thomas will later tell investigators. Tossing their heads, rolling their eyes white. But Lady Catherine doesn't notice, or doesn't care. She climbs into the carriage alone. No maid, no companion, just Lady Catherine and her horses, heading home through streets still echoing with St. Patrick's Day celebrations. 17 minutes later, the river will swallow everything. But what the fishermen don't see, what no one sees, happens in those missing minutes on the darkened streets between the Assembly Rooms and Merchant's Quay. Something that explains why the horses bolt, why Lady Catherine screams in that not quite human way, why nothing ever surfaces from the perfectly calm water, something that connects to every cruelty she inflicted, every family destroyed, every child maimed in her mills, something that has been waiting, patient as stone, for exactly this moment. The first incident occurs 3 weeks before the drowning. February 23, 1899, the Thornbury-Blake estate, North Pasture. Groundskeeper Liam Murphy finds Thunder and Tempest in their paddock at dawn. Both horses stand perfectly still, facing the ruined monastery wall that marks the estate's eastern boundary. Their bodies tremble. Foam drips from their mouths. Their eyes remain fixed on something Liam cannot see. "Come on, boys," he calls. Neither horse responds. For 3 hours they remain frozen, staring at the ruins. When Liam finally approaches close enough to touch Thunder's flank, the horse's skin is cold, dead cold despite the animal's racing heart. Liam reports this to head groom Samuel Barrett. Samuel dismisses it as colic or some dietary upset, but Liam notices something Samuel doesn't, or pretends not to. The horses are standing in a perfect geometric pattern. Their hooves mark out angles that correspond exactly to the monastery's ancient foundation stones, visible as raised earth beneath the grass. Stones that mark where the chapel once stood, where monks were executed in 1539 for refusing to acknowledge Henry VIII as head of the church. That night, Liam tells his wife, "Those horses are standing on graves, marking them out as if something under the ground called them there." His wife crosses herself. "Don't talk foolishness." But Liam can't shake the image. The way the horse's breath came out in clouds despite the mild weather. The way the ground seemed darker where they stood. The way he felt watched from the ruins, though nothing moved among the tumbled stones. The second incident occurs 1 week later. March 2nd, 1899. Thornbury-Blake Textile Mill, engine room. 12-year-old Sean Byrne, grandson of the Margaret Byrne evicted 2 months prior, operates a spinning frame on the 2nd floor. His shift runs from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. His fingers bleed through the bandages wrapped around them. He hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. At 2:17 p.m. his sleeve catches in the machinery. The frame drags him in. Gear teeth tear flesh. Pulleys snap bones. Workers scream. The foreman reaches for the emergency stop, but the lever won't move. It's as if invisible hands hold it in place. For 47 seconds, witnesses will be specific about the timing. Sean's body is mangled by machinery that should have stopped instantly. The mechanical roar drowns out his screams. Blood sprays across the spinning frames, the walls, the windows. When the machinery finally stops, silence falls like a weight. Sean Byrne lies in pieces on the factory floor. His right hand, still clutching a thread he was guiding, sits 3 feet from his body. The foreman swears the emergency stop was jammed. The constable who investigates finds the lever works perfectly. The coroner rules accidental death. Lady Catherine's lawyer ensures the family receives no compensation. Company policy clearly states that injury resulting from worker negligence voids any claims. But 3 workers quit that day, not because of the death. Mill deaths happen. But because of what they saw in the moment before the machinery stopped. Mary Killeen, who worked a frame beside Sean's, tells Father Donnelly, His eyes changed, father, right before he died. Went from terrified to calm, like he understood something, and his lips moved. I read them clear as day. What did he say, father? Donnelly asks. Mary's hands shake. He said, she's coming, she finally paid. And father, he was smiling when he said it. Father Donnelly makes note of this. He's begun keeping a record, though he doesn't yet understand why. Odd happenings at the estate. Strange deaths. Workers who speak of presences and watchers. Dreams that plague the entire town. Dreams of drowning, of suffocation, of being crushed beneath weight. The Thornbury-Blake family has ruled Waterford for 3 generations, but Father Donnelly senses something shifting, some long-accumulated debt coming due. The third incident occurs 10 days before the drowning, March 7, 1899. O'Sullivan Farm, tenant holding 31. Constable Patrick Quinn arrives at 6 a.m. with an eviction notice. Behind him comes the bailiff and 6 men hired for intimidation. The O'Sullivan family, parents and 7 children ranging from 2 months to 9 years, have been late on rent twice in the past 6 months. Lady Catherine demands they vacate immediately. But when Constable Quinn approaches the cottage, he stops. Every window blazes with candlelight, though the sun has risen. The door stands open, and from inside comes singing, Latin singing, the kind he remembers from Mass, though the words aren't quite right. "Hello?" he calls. No response. Just that eerie singing, multiple voices in harmony. He enters the cottage. The O'Sullivan family sits around the table, all 9 of them. Their eyes are closed, their mouths move in perfect synchronization, chanting Latin phrases Constable Quinn doesn't recognize. The candles around them number exactly 13. "Mr. O'Sullivan?" No response. He touches the father's shoulder. The man's skin is ice cold. The chanting stops. All 9 O'Sullivans open their eyes simultaneously. They stare at Constable Quinn with expressions he will describe later as not quite human, like something else was looking out through their faces. Then they speak in unison, voices overlapping in impossible harmony. The debt will be paid. The river will claim what it's owed. The horses know the way. Mrs. O'Sullivan blinks. The strange light fades from their eyes. She looks around, confused. What time is it? We were just saying evening prayers. But it's morning, and they've lost 12 hours. Constable Quinn backs out of the cottage. He tells the bailiff the family has cholera, a lie, but one that postpones the eviction. He files a report describing the family as mentally disturbed, but leaves out the chanting, the cold skin, the unified voice. That night he visits Father Donnelly. "There's something wrong in this town, Father, something worse than poverty or politics. It's like some old evil has been sleeping and Lady Catherine's cruelty has finally woken it up." Father Donnelly shows him the records he's been keeping. Strange animal behavior, unexplained deaths, dreams, the way fog patterns on certain nights form shapes that look almost intentional. Reports from tenant farmers about lights in the old monastery ruins, horses refusing to pass certain roads. "There's a pattern," Father Donnelly says, spreading his notes across the desk. "Every incident connects to Lady Catherine's cruelty. The burn eviction in December, 3 days later the horses start acting strange. The mill accident, exactly 1 week after she reduced wages again. The O'Sullivan trance, the same day she signed their eviction papers. You think," Constable Quinn struggles with the words, "you think something is responding, taking revenge?" "I think," Father Donnelly says carefully, "that in 1539, when Henry VIII's soldiers executed the monks who refused to renounce Rome, those monks cursed this land. They promised that any who profited from the monastery's destruction would eventually face judgment. And I think that curse has been waiting, building power, feeding on every cruel act, every injustice, every death that enriches the Thornbury-Blake fortune. That's madness, Father. Is it? Explain the horses. Explain Sean Byrne's final words. Explain the O'Sullivans' lost time." Father Donnelly's voice drops to a whisper. "3 nights ago I had a dream. I saw Lady Catherine's carriage pulled into the river by hands made of water. I saw horses running not away from danger but towards something they recognized, something they'd been summoned to meet. Constable Quinn leaves without responding, but he doesn't sleep that night. He watches the fog roll off the Blackwater River and wonders if Father Donnelly might be right. The 4th incident occurs the night before the drowning. March 16, 1899, Thornbury-Blake Estate, North Tower. Head groom Samuel Barrett checks Thunder and Tempest one final time before retiring. The horses seem calm, well-fed, ready for tomorrow's duty conveying Lady Catherine to the St. Patrick's Day Gala. At 2 a.m., Samuel wakes to the sound of hooves on stone. He rises, dresses, and runs to the stables. Both horses stand outside their stalls. The doors remain locked. Samuel has the only key. But Thunder and Tempest stand free in the stable yard. They face the house, heads raised, ears forward. And they're screaming, not neighing, screaming like horses do when they smell fire or predators. Samuel approaches slowly. Easy, boys, easy now. Thunder turns his head. In the moonlight, Samuel sees the horse's eyes. They're not rolling with panic, they're focused, intelligent, almost knowing. "What do you see?" Samuel whispers. "What's out there?" As if in answer, fog rolls down from the monastery ruins. But this fog moves wrong. It doesn't drift or spread naturally. It comes in a deliberate wave, like something purposeful, something alive. It reaches the stable, R&D and surrounds the horses. Thunder and Tempest go silent. Their bodies relax. They lower their heads into the fog, breathing deeply, as if accepting something, embracing it. Then the fog retreats. It flows back toward the ruins, and both horses watch it go. When it disappears into the ancient stones, Thunder and Tempest walk calmly back to their stalls and wait for Samuel to unlock the doors. He does, hands shaking. The horses enter, lie down, and close their eyes. Within moments, both are sleeping peacefully. Samuel stands in the stable yard until dawn. He knows, though he cannot explain how, that something terrible is coming, something the horses have been preparing for, something they've accepted as inevitable. In the morning, he considers warning Lady Catherine, but she pays him well, and he's afraid if he speaks of fog and knowing horses and ancient curses, she'll dismiss him without reference. So he harnesses Thunder and Tempest. He polishes the brass fittings on the carriage. He helps Lady Catherine climb aboard at 11:30 p.m. on March 17th, and he watches them drive away into the St. Patrick's Day darkness, wondering if he'll ever see his horses again. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button and let us know you're still with us. The investigation into what happened next revealed details that made even hardened constables question their understanding of reality. Share this with someone who loves dark historical mysteries. Drop a comment with your theory. Was this revenge from beyond the grave, or something else entirely? Let's discover what happens next. March 18th, 1899. 6:13 a.m. Merchants Quay, Waterford. First light reveals a crowd of 200 people gathered at the spot where Lady Catherine's carriage entered the water. Constable Quinn has been there since midnight, supervising the initial search. His eyes are hollow from lack of sleep. "Bring the drags up again," he orders. Third sweep, concentrate on the deep channel. 4 boats work the river, iron drags scrape the bottom. Professional divers, brought from Cork at considerable expense, search by touch in the murky water. They find nothing. Not timber, not brass, not leather, not bone. At 8 a.m. the tide changes. The river reverses direction, flowing inland from the sea. This happens twice daily. Waterford natives barely notice. But today something comes with the tide, a smell. Not salt and seaweed, but something older. Damp stone, incense, blood. The crowd stirs uneasily. Some cross themselves. Others back away from the river's edge. "There," shouts one of the divers surfacing near Reginald's tower. "I found something." The boats converge. The diver holds up his discovery. It's not from the carriage. It's a stone. A carved stone covered in Latin inscriptions, worn smooth by centuries underwater. Father Donnelly pushes through the crowd. He examines the stone, his face growing pale. "This is from the monastery, from the chapel's foundation. It should be 2 miles upriver, buried under the estate." "How did it get here?" asks Constable Quinn. Father Donnelly traces the Latin words. His lips move silently, translating. Then he looks up and his expression makes the crowd step back. It's part of a curse, laid in 1539 by Brother Aidan before his execution. It says, "What is taken by cruelty will be reclaimed by the waters. What is built on sacred ground will sink into sacred depths. The horses will remember, the river will receive, and the guilty will find no rest, no surface, no redemption." Silence falls over Merchants Quay. 200 people absorb the implications. Then another diver surfaces. "Inspector, you need to see this." He's found something else. Not a stone this time. A piece of wood freshly broken from the carriage. Finally, evidence of last night's plunge. But when they bring it aboard, examinations reveal something impossible. The wood is ancient. Not 9 hours old, but centuries old. It's waterlogged not from last night's submersion, but from decades, maybe centuries underwater. The brass fitting attached to it is corroded in ways that should take 100 years. Dr. William Hastings, the county physician, examines it carefully. This makes no sense. This carriage piece has been submerged for, I would estimate, at least 200 years. But we all saw it last night. It was new, maintained, perfect. More pieces surfaced throughout the morning. Each one tells the same impossible story. The carriage aged centuries in a single night. The brass turned green with verdigris, the leather rotted to fragments, the wood became waterlogged and soft. But there are no bodies, no bones, no fabric from Lady Catherine's crimson cloak, no horseshoes from Thunder and Tempest's hooves. At 11 a.m., Constable Quinn makes a decision. We're dragging the river all the way to the estate. Every inch. This isn't a simple drowning. It takes 6 days. Every boat in Waterford participates. They find more carved stones, all from the monastery, all bearing curse fragments. They find ancient coins, medieval pottery, bones that Dr. Hastings identifies as centuries old, likely from the executed monks. But they find no trace of Lady Catherine Thornbury-Blake, no trace of Thunder and Tempest, no trace of anything that should be there. On the 7th day, March 24th, something breaks the surface at dawn. A carriage wheel, intact, floating in water that should have sunk it. The brass hub gleams, not tarnished like the other pieces, but polished, recently polished, as if someone underwater had been maintaining it. Constable Quinn reaches for it with a boat hook. The moment the hook touches the wheel, it sinks, drops straight down. The divers go after it, but the river here is 30 feet deep, and the bottom is mud that swallows anything denser than water. The wheel is gone. Like everything else connected to that night, it has vanished into depths that refuse to give up their secrets. But the truly disturbing discovery comes not from the river, but from the estate. March 25th. Samuel Barrett, the head groom, opens Thunder and Tempest's stalls for the morning feeding. Both stalls are empty. Not surprising. He's assumed the horses died with Lady Catherine, but the water troughs in both stalls are full, not of water, of river water, Blackwater River water, complete with silt, riverweed, and the distinctive smell of the tidal estuary. And in the mud at the bottom of each trough, pressed clear as a signature, hoofprints. Thunders and Tempests, unmistakable to Samuel, who's been shoeing them for 8 years. The prints are fresh, made within hours. Samuel runs to find Constable Quinn. When they return together, the troughs are empty, bone dry, as if they'd never held water at all. But the mud marks remain on the stone floor, and something else, impossible to explain, impossible to dismiss. Both horses' headstalls hang on their hooks outside the stalls, clean, dry, properly maintained, exactly where Samuel would hang them after grooming. But Samuel hasn't touched them since March 17th. He's certain of this. These headstalls should be somewhere on the river bottom, tangled in the carriage wreckage that doesn't exist. Someone's playing games, Constable Quinn says, but his voice lacks conviction. Samuel shakes his head. No one's been in this stable but me. I have the only key. And besides, he points to the headstalls. Look at the leather. It's damp, river damp, and there's silt, the same silt from the troughs. Constable Quinn examines the leather. Samuel is right. The headstalls are wet with river water. But more than that, woven into Thunder's headstall are strands of riverweed, and scratched into the leather of Tempest's as if carved with a fingernail are 3 Latin words. Father Donnelly translates them later. Debita solventur tandem. The debt is finally paid. The official investigation begins on March 26, 1899, 9 days after Lady Catherine's disappearance. Inspector Harold Wickham arrives from Dublin, sent by the Lord Lieutenant's office. At 49, Wickham has investigated murders, political assassinations, and Fenian bombings. He does not believe in curses, supernatural revenge, or medieval monks reaching from beyond the grave. He believes in evidence. And the evidence in Waterford makes no sense. His first interview is with Thomas Walsh, Lady Catherine's driver. Walk me through the evening, Wickham instructs. Every detail. Thomas sits in the assembly room's parlor, hat in his hands, eyes red from lack of sleep. I brought the carriage round at 11:30 p.m., sir. The horses seemed nervous. Thunder kept tossing his head, and Tempest stamped his feet. But Lady Catherine insisted we leave immediately. She was agitated about something, kept looking over her shoulder. Did she say why? No, sir, but I heard her talking to herself as she climbed in. She said, "It's just superstitious nonsense. Monks dead 400 years have no power." Thomas swallows hard. It struck me odd at the time. Why would she mention monks? What happened next? I drove them toward home, the usual route, down Patrick Street, across the bridge, then up along the quay. But as we turned onto Merchant's Quay, Thomas closes his eyes. The horses bolted. Not scared bolting, sir. Purpose bolting. Like they'd been called. They ran straight for the barrier. I pulled the reins so hard I dislocated my shoulder. But it was like thunder and tempest weren't my horses anymore. Like something else was driving them. Something else? Thomas opens his eyes. They're haunted. I know how this sounds, Inspector, but in the moment before we hit the barrier I looked back through the carriage window. Lady Catherine wasn't alone. Wickham leans forward. Someone else was in the carriage? Not someone, some things. Thomas's voice drops to a whisper. Figures made of water, flowing, dripping figures surrounding her. And they were pulling her down into the carriage floor, like the floor had become the river itself. She was screaming, but not at me, at them. She was saying, I didn't know, the land was already mine, I'm not responsible for what my ancestors did. What happened then? The horses and carriage went over. I jumped clear just before impact, landed on the quay shoulder first. When I looked up, the water was calm, like glass, not a ripple, and I heard... Thomas stops, struggling with the words. I heard singing, Latin singing, coming from underwater, the same chanting I've heard at midnight sometimes coming from the monastery ruins on the estate. Inspector Wickham makes notes, his expression neutral. You heard underwater singing? Yes, sir. From dead monks. I know how it sounds, sir. Wickham taps his pencil against his notebook. Mr. Walsh, you jumped from a moving carriage and dislocated your shoulder. It's possible the impact caused hallucinations. Concussion symptoms can include auditory disturbances. But Thomas Walsh shakes his head. My shoulder dislocated when I landed, sir. After the carriage was already underwater. I was conscious the whole time. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Wickham's second interview is with the fishermen, Patrick Devlin, Sean Murphy, and James O'Brien. Their stories align perfectly. Too perfectly, Wickham notes. It's as if they rehearsed or experienced something so shocking that every detail burned into memory. The water was wrong, Patrick Devlin insists. We've fished the Blackwater 40 years between us. We know its moods. But that night the water wasn't natural. Define not natural. It was too calm. Not just calm, dead, like nothing lived in it. And cold. The air temperature was mild, but the water... Sean Murphy takes over. We put our nets in just after the carriage sank. The water was so cold it burned our hands. Ice cold in March. Impossible. And the singing? Wickham asks. James O'Brien nods. See, Lyra's church bells, Latin hymns, coming from directly below the surface where the carriage went down. We rode right over the spot. The water there was so clear we could see down 20 feet. An inspector... He hesitates. Go on. The river bottom was glowing, blue-white light like moonlight, but coming from below. And in that light, we saw shapes. Human shapes, dozens of them, surrounding something we couldn't quite make out. They were moving in formation like a procession. Or a ritual. Did you report this to Constable Quinn? We tried, sir. But when we looked back at the water, the glow was gone. The clarity was gone. It was just normal murky river water again. We thought we'd imagined it. 3 grown men, all having the same hallucination at the same time. Wickham writes this down without comment. But privately, he's beginning to feel uneasy. Too many witnesses. Too many consistent details. Too many impossible elements that nevertheless seem to be true. His third interview changes everything. Father Donnelly brings him the records, 23 pages of handwritten notes dating back 6 months. Every strange occurrence in Waterford, every odd death, every unexplained phenomenon. You've been documenting this, Wickham says. It's not a question. I'm a priest inspector. I deal in faith, but I'm also a historian. I studied at Maynooth. I know the monastery's history. And I knew months ago that something was building. Father Donnelly spreads his notes across the table. Look at the pattern. Every act of cruelty Lady Catherine committed corresponds to an escalation in supernatural activity. You believe in supernatural activity, Father? I believe in evil, Inspector. Human evil and other kinds. The monks who died in 1539 were martyrs. They died protecting their faith, their community, and this land before they were executed. Brother Aidan, the last abbot, laid a curse. It's recorded in the annals at Trinity College. I've verified it. Father Donnelly produces a leather journal, ancient and carefully preserved. This is Brother Aidan's own hand, his final entry, written the morning of his execution. Shall I translate? Wickham nods. We bind this land in sacred trust. Let no soul who profits from our murder know peace. Let no fortune built on our graves endure. When cruelty compounds upon cruelty, when the innocent suffer for the guilty's gain, then shall the earth remember. The waters remember. The stones remember. And we, though dead, shall return to balance the scales. The horses will know us. The river will receive us. And justice, though delayed, will be absolute. Silence fills the room. Inspector Wickham, who has spent his career dismissing superstition, cannot dismiss the historical record in front of him. The Thornbury-Blake family built their fortune on monastery land. Father Donnelly continues. Every generation has been cruel, but Lady Catherine, he shakes his head. Her cruelty was systematic, calculated. She took pleasure in it. 12 evictions in 1 year. She reduced mill wages while raising her own rents. She fought every safety regulation. She blocked charity efforts. She used her wealth not just to profit but to harm. And you believe this awakened the curse? I believe the curse was always active, Inspector. Waiting. Growing stronger with each injustice. And on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, which is also the feast day of the martyred monks of Waterford, the curse reached critical mass. Inspector Wickham's investigation expands. He interviews estate workers, tenant farmers, mill employees. A picture emerges of systematic cruelty spanning decades. Margaret Burns' eviction was typical. 84 years old, a tenant for 63 years, she was 3 weeks late on rent due to illness. Lady Catherine could have granted an extension. Instead, she made an example. Let them see what happens to deadbeats, she reportedly said. The Malloy family, turned out in W. Inter with 6 children, now lives in a one-room shed in the poorhouse. The youngest child, 2-year-old Katie, died of pneumonia in February. The mill records reveal a death rate of 1 worker per month for the past 3 years. Most are children. Most die from machinery accidents that proper safety equipment would prevent. Lady Catherine owns the mill. She personally vetoed every safety proposal. She said safety measures reduced productivity, testifies mill foreman Richard Crawford. She said if workers were injured, it was their own clumsiness. She said there were always more workers to replace the dead ones. But Wickham also documents the strange occurrences. He's a rational man, but he cannot explain. The carriage wood aging centuries overnight, the monastery stones appearing 2 miles from their original location, the horses' headstalls returning to the stable, the Latin chanting. Multiple witnesses heard the impossibly cold water, the underwater glow, the absolute absence of any bodies. He drafts his preliminary report on April 3rd. It's careful, diplomatic. It suggests accidental death complicated by unusual tidal conditions and possible mass hallucination among witnesses, but he attaches Father Donnelly's research as an appendix, and in his private journal, never meant for official eyes, he writes, I do not believe in curses, but I believe in evil, and I believe that evil, human or otherwise, leaves marks on the world. What happened in Waterford on March 17th was not natural, it was not rational, it was not explicable by any system of law or science I understand. If pressed, I would say I witnessed the universe correcting an imbalance. Justice, achieved by means beyond mortal authority. The legal proceedings are complicated by the absence of a body. Under British law, death cannot be officially declared without remains, but Lady Catherine's solicitors petition for a presumptive death ruling, necessary to settle the estate. The hearing occurs on April 15th at Waterford Courthouse. The gallery is packed. Every tenant, every mill worker, every person who suffered under Lady Catherine's rule wants to witness this. The solicitor presents the evidence, multiple witnesses, the river search, the impossibility of survival. He asks Judge William Pemberton to declare Lady Catherine legally dead. But before the judge can rule, someone stands in the gallery. Father Donnelly. Your Honor, I must object. The courtroom stirs. Judge Pemberton frowns. On what grounds, Father? On the grounds that declaring Lady Catherine dead would be premature. We have no body. We have no certainty about what occurred. And, Father Donnelly chooses his words carefully, there are precedents in Irish law for situations where death is unclear, cases where individuals disappeared under mysterious circumstances and were found alive years later. It's a thin argument. Everyone knows Lady Catherine is dead. But Father Donnelly has planted doubt. And the judge, Catholic himself, seems to understand the subtext. Do not grant the estate to Lady Catherine, heirs, until we understand what happened. Motion denied. Judge Pemberton rules. Death will not be declared until either a body is recovered or 7 years have passed. In the interim, the estate will be held in trust. The solicitors are stunned. This delays inheritance, complicates succession, creates legal limbo. But in the gallery, the tenants and mill workers smile. 7 years without a ruling means 7 years of uncertainty, and uncertainty, for once, works in their favor. The cover-up begins immediately. Lady Catherine's family solicitors hire a Dublin newspaper to write an alternative account. "Tragic accident claims Waterford aristocrat," the headline reads. The story emphasizes the horses bolting, the unfortunate timing, the sad loss of a generous employer and landlord. No mention of curses, no mention of underwater singing, no mention of the impossible evidence. The Thor. Thornbury-Blake family's political connections ensure that Inspector Wickham's report is filed and forgotten. His appendix about the monastery curse is removed. His private journal disappears, though Wickham himself claims he burned it, disturbed by his own conclusions. Thomas Walsh, the driver, is offered a generous pension if he stops talking about water figures in the carriage. He accepts. He moves to Cork. He never drives a carriage again. The fishermen are paid to recant their testimony. Patrick Devlin refuses. He's found dead in his boat 2 months later, officially ruled a heart attack, though he was 38 and healthy. The monastery stones found in the river are quietly returned to the estate and reburied. The carved inscriptions are never photographed or recorded. Within 6 months, Waterford's newspapers stop mentioning the incident. When they do reference it, they call it the regrettable drowning and move on quickly. But the people remember, the tenants remember, the mill workers remember, and they know that for once, something powerful intervened on their behalf. The aftermath transforms Waterford. Without Lady Catherine's direct control, the estate trustees are more lenient. Evictions stop. Rents are reduced. Margaret Byrne, the evicted grandmother, is allowed to return to her cottage at no charge. The mill implements safety measures. The foreman who punished bathroom breaks is fired. The locked exits are opened. Child labor under age 12 is banned. The trustees fear another accident might happen if cruelty continues. No one says the curse is still active, but everyone acts as if it might be. The Thornbury-Blake estate, without Lady Catherine's iron hand, begins to decay. The house falls into disrepair. The grounds grow wild. The North Tower, where Lady Catherine's husband died mysteriously decades earlier, is abandoned entirely after servants report hearing Latin chanting from its rooms at midnight. By 1906, the estate trustees petitioned to sell the land, but no one wants it. The property sits empty. The monastery ruins, untouched for 400 years, seem to grow more prominent. People begin calling them the Judgment Stones. Thunder and Tempest are never found. Their stalls remain empty at the estate stable. But Samuel Barrett, the head groom, swears he sometimes sees them on foggy nights. 2 magnificent Cleveland bays galloping along the river's edge, heading toward the monastery ruins, free of harness and human will. In 1925, exactly 7 years after the hearing, Judge Pemberton, retired now but still alive, receives an anonymous letter. It contains a single pressed flower from the monastery ruins and a note in Latin, Debita solventur, quis tandem venit. The debt is paid. Peace finally comes. Judge Pemberton shows it to Father Donnelly, now elderly. The priest smiles. Perhaps Brother Aidan's curse is complete. Justice was served. The cruel were punished. The land is returning to peace. Do you believe that? The judge asks. Father Donnelly looks toward the river, where fog rises in the evening light. I believe that cruelty has consequences, sometimes immediately, sometimes after 400 years, but always eventually the balance is restored. The Waterford drowning of 1899 changed Ireland, though few recognize the connection. In 1900, Parliament passes the Irish Land Act, granting tenants more rights and protections against arbitrary eviction. The law isn't named for Lady Catherine Thornbury-Blake, but her case, and the publicity around it, creates political pressure for reform. In 1901, factory safety legislation tightens regulations on child labor and machinery operation. The Seanburn Mill death, documented in Inspector Wickham's suppressed report, becomes a case study cited by reformers. The case also impacts how Ireland views its medieval past. The monastery ruins at Waterford become a pilgrimage site. Historians begin documenting the martyred monks' stories. Brother Aidan's curse, once dismissed as superstition, is recognized as a historical record of resistance against oppression. By 1910, Irish nationalism has found a new symbol, the idea that the land itself remembers injustice, that Ireland's soil, stones, and water hold memory of every wrong committed against the Irish people. This metaphor, rooted in the very real events of March 17, 1899, galvanizes a generation. When the Easter Rising occurs in 1916, Some participants invoke Brother Aidan's words, "The earth remembers, the waters remember. Justice, though delayed, will be absolute." But the case also reveals something darker about human nature. In the weeks after Lady Catherine's disappearance, psychologists and folklorists descend on Waterford. They interview witnesses, study the evidence, analyze the mass psychology that convinced dozens of people they witnessed supernatural events. Dr. Edmund Pierce from Trinity College publishes a paper in 1902, Collective Delusion and Social Revenge, the Waterford Drowning as Mass Hysteria. His thesis suggests that a community so oppressed by Lady Catherine created a shared delusion of supernatural justice because they couldn't achieve real justice through legal means. The curse is a fiction, Pierce writes, but it's a necessary fiction. The oppressed needed to believe that cosmic forces would punish the cruel. They needed to believe the universe was moral, even when human institutions were not. So they created evidence. They invented Latin chanting. They described underwater glows and water figures that never existed. The carriage simply sank. The horses drowned. Lady Catherine died. Everything else is elaboration. Father Donnelly responds publicly, Dr. Pierce's thesis assumes all evidence can be dismissed if it contradicts his worldview. But what if the universe actually is moral? What if justice is not merely a human construct, but a fundamental law as real as gravity? The rationalist sees only material causes. The believer sees the hand of God. Perhaps both perspectives contain truth. The debate continues for decades. Rationalists cite Waterford as proof of mass delusion. Believers cite it as proof of divine justice. Neither side can definitively prove their case. Similar cases emerge in the wake of Waterford's publicity. In 1903, a Manchester factory owner who routinely beat child workers is found drowned in a vat of dye. Witnesses report hearing children's laughter echoing through the factory, though no children were present. The case is ruled accidental, but parallels to Waterford are noted. In 1907, a Scottish landlord who evicted 73 families during the Highland clearances falls from a cliff. Oofar, if I'm too cruel, will something push back? Some temper their behavior, others double down, convinced that showing fear would encourage the mob. But all of them think about it, the possibility that their actions have consequences beyond legal or economic repercussions. For the oppressed, Waterford offers something rare, hope. Not hope that supernatural forces will always intervene, that would be foolish, but hope that cruelty has limits, that pushing people too far creates backlash, that justice, even if delayed, even if achieved by unclear means, is possible. The tenants who returned to their cottages after Lady Catherine's death didn't need to believe in Brother Aidan's curse. They just needed to know that tyrants can fall, that the powerful are not ultimately immune to consequence. This belief, half faith, half experience, sustains them through continued hardships. It spreads through Ireland's tenant communities, mill towns, mining villages. The story of Waterford becomes a parable. Push the people too far, and the river will claim you. Whether that's literally true doesn't matter as much as the fact that people believe it might be. In 1949, 50 years after the drowning, a historian named Margaret Walsh, no relation to the driver, writes the definitive account. The Thornbury-Blake drowning, history, mystery, and social revolution. She concludes, what actually happened on March 17, 1899, may never be known. Did Lady Catherine Thornbury-Blake die in a simple carriage accident, embellished by folklore into a supernatural event? Or did forces beyond our understanding intervene to correct an injustice that human law could not address? The answer likely depends on what we choose to believe about the universe's moral structure. But perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps the significance of Waterford is not whether the curse was real, but that people needed it to be real. In a world of systematic injustice, where the cruel prosper and the innocent suffer, the idea of cosmic justice provides hope. And hope, whether founded in fact or faith, is what enables people to continue fighting for change. Brother Aidan's curse may be 400 years old, but the hunger for justice it represents is eternal. What do you think drove the events of March 17, 1899? Was it Brother Aidan's 400-year-old curse finally coming due, a coincidental accident that a traumatized community interpreted as supernatural justice, or something in between, natural forces responding to accumulated cruelty in ways we don't yet understand? The evidence points in all directions. The rational explanations can't account for everything. The supernatural explanations require faith, and the witnesses, dozens of them from different backgrounds, with nothing to gain, all told the same impossible story. Leave your theories in the comments below. Was this revenge from beyond the grave or something else entirely? If you want to explore more lost chapters of Irish history, subscribe to The Silent Abbey and hit that notification bell. We're uncovering the stories that history tried to bury, stories of justice, injustice, and the thin line between the two. Until next time, remember, the river keeps its secrets. The stones remember. And sometimes, after 400 years of patience, the earth itself demands justice. See you in the next video.